Hey, evening all. It's Scott again. So I'm doing my video. This week I'm going to talk about something that's really hard for me to discuss because I mentioned I have kidney disease, and it started when I was 16. So let's go back to 1994 here. Oh, okay. I guess the cat wanted to join me. So I was in 10th grade, and most people 16, 15, 16 years old, they're thinking of, getting a job, getting a car, getting their driver's license. Fortunately, I had to go have my first major operation. I used to get my kidney stones on my right side. And that year, I ended up with one that put me in the hospital. And we found out that my lower half of my right kidney never developed from when I was a baby. And the doctor at the time, he decided the best thing to do to try to stop from getting stones, because I used to get them every 6 months like clockwork. It was twice a year, 6 months, no matter what happened, I would have a stone. That's my Luna behind me. She seems to want to hang out today. So, I had to have that operation. And in the 90s, they still cut you open. So I have a flank scar that runs from my back to my chest. And I'll talk about this more later because it has something to do with my disability. I can't remember exactly how long those operations were, but I know they were 2 days. I had one day, and then they had to remove polyps on my left side for another. I think it was 8-hour operation for one and 8 for the other. Anyways, I don't remember. It was 25 years ago now, but I know they were intense, and it was not something, at 15 or 16 that you ever expected to deal with. You're a kid, you're in school, your life revolves around, finishing that and getting a job and doing, getting your license. So, what I do remember from that time, there was a student teacher. I haven't thought about her in years. I wonder whatever happened with her. I remember her name was Adriana. And I teased the anesthesiologist about her because him and I had a disagreement. And I told him that she was my student doctor and he needed to leave her alone. I know there was a small, short nurse. And at that time, I was, a big kid. I was overweight, and I had 210 pounds. And I remember trying to get up out of bed, and she insisted that she was going to help me at 5'5", 210 pounds, and she probably was 5 feet and 100 and something pounds. Lift me out of bed and make sure that I didn't fall when I decided to get up. I told her no way. And luckily there was another nurse at that time I remember his name was Chris, and he looked like a linebacker, so he helped me climb out of bed. At that time, it was the first time that I experienced having bags stuck out of my back because they were draining my kidneys. So I had, drainage bags on both sides. It was the first time I experienced what it felt like to have a stint. And, for men, there's only one way you can go into your urinary tract, so I don't think we need to talk about more than that for, what it feels like to have a stint. That year ended basically my school year. I was homeschooled for the rest of the year. After my mother had an argument with the school district because they wouldn't send me tutors, and they basically said, well, if he's never gonna finish the school year because the paperwork for the tutors was never handed in. My principal was an asshole, excuse my language, and he decided that he wasn't gonna do the paperwork to get me tutors. So she went over his head and went to the school board, and within like 2 weeks, I had my tutors here. Oh, that's really hard to talk about still. So that was 11th grade. I had my full year. It was the first time that I took my baking classes. At that time they offered, you could go to school half day, you could go to a vocational school for half day. So I went for the vocational school. Senior year, we found out that the operation that they took on my right side didn't work the way they hoped. So those stones now moved to the left, and they would stay there for the next 20 odd years until we finally figured out a way to prevent that. Well, they're not stopped, but I no longer have to deal with the pain of having them. I'll talk about this in a little bit. So senior year, again, I was still sick because, you don't recover from surgery like that even 2 years later. And I remember going to my graduation, and I know I was with my friends, but I don't remember much of walking across the stage. I remember walking the stage, but other than that, I don't remember too much of that year either, because it was another year I had to be operated on. I did take another vocational year for at the school, but I think I only finished a couple months of that. I know I had to drop it. And so my senior year, I basically went to school for half a day. I took, at that time, there was no, New York State had the option of dropping classes. You can't do that much now. So I dropped, I think I dropped math and science, and there was only English and social studies, and I got excused from gym because the doctor was worried that if I got injured, that was basically the end. I would have been either dead or had a major problem. High school finished. Most people after high school, they went off to college or, 20s. They went to college. They got their jobs. They started dating, maybe started a family, depending on, how things went. For me, I was stuck dealing with my kidney disease. So again, every 6 months, twice a year, I'd up in the hospital, probably for a week. At that time, it was a week, because they had to go up there and physically pull a stone out of me. And again, for a male, there's, only one way to get to your urinary tract. So I experienced again what it felt like to have stents and drainage bags and all that fun stuff. When I used to get a stone, I would do my ritual, which usually ended up me rolling around on the floor in agony, or drawing the hottest bath I can stand and soaking in it for 20 minutes to a half hour, just to give me enough relief for a couple hours to get see if I can make it through the night. Half the time we ended up back in the ER in the middle of the evening, in the middle of the morning, after midnight. Didn't matter if it was a holiday, birthday. I know I spent one birthday in the ER. I spent one Christmas in the ER or in the hospital. There was one time that I went with my friend to Canada to meet an author for a book signing, and we were driving home, and George Bush Jr. was president. I remember that. And I ended up in the hospital. I drove all the way home from Canada with her in the passenger seat, which was, 2 or 3 hour, 4 hour drive from Toronto to here. And by the time I came home, I was like, well, Mom, we have to go back to the ER. It was a mess. And it still affects me now. In my 30s, I finally managed to find a way to prevent these stones from happening. The doctor started a new test where they test you now for phosphate. And we found out that, which is for my type of stones, is an element that would combat the calcium to stop the stones from forming. And when we found out that, when they tested me, that she's like, well, your phosphate, you don't even have any. You're basically, your body doesn't make any, and you're not getting it in your food. So you need to start adding citrus to your diet. So I now drink a lot of juice. There's a calcium phosphate supplement that I take. And I also drink my nutrition shake, which also has a lot of phosphate in it. So yeah, those have stopped me from having stones, but it took 20 years to figure this out. So fortunately, I'm still on disability. So when I say I don't have the funds, I mean I don't have the funds, because when you're on medical disability with the government, your assets are marked at $2,000, and if you make more than that, they cut you off. Which, unfortunately, I think with me doing my book business is going to happen soon. Maybe not this year, but it might happen next year or the year after. I'm not sure. But it'll be something I'll have to handle when that happens. I did finally manage to go to college in my 30s, which, I'm glad I waited, because I don't think I would have been able to do it in my 20s, and it wasn't an interest. I had to deal with all the stuff that I came with my disease. So I took 2 years of food preparation. It's not what it's called now, but I can't remember. It's about 10 years ago now. I had just finished my internship when I ended up in the hospital. And the doctor told me that my urinary tract, from having stones pulled out of me for 20 odd years, every 2 months, twice a year, was basically destroyed. I had scar tissue, and my healthy kidney, which was, I only have 1.5 left, was drowning itself in urine. So we had to rush me into emergency surgery again, or I would be dead in 5 years. Because he had to do reconstructive surgery on my right kidney, or on my left urinary tract and kidney, or I wouldn't be here now. So much for, working with my culinary degree and getting on with my life. It didn't happen. I ended up being home again for, 2 or 3 years, recovering. I mean, it takes your toll out of it. There was times I also I just wanted to die. And I told my mother that I was going to take the shotgun and kill myself because I couldn't do this anymore. And it really hurts. And she knew it. Because oh shit. I had already died 4 times on the table. And one time I almost didn't come back. The doctor told her that he couldn't get me to breathe. You know what that does to a parent? To watch your kid at 16 to have the surgery every year. It destroyed her too. I know it did. Sorry for getting emotional here, but it's hard. So, beyond top of the operations, I dealt with suicidal thoughts and depression, and I still deal with my depression. And there's times when I feel a twinge over there, and I'm like, this shit's gonna happen again. I can't do this. So, it changes you when you're, have a chronic disease. And it's hard. Maybe this video might help somebody if they find it who deals with what I went through. I don't know. But I needed to say this. And it was something I've been thinking about. After I finished my culinary degree, I tried to go back for a nutrition degree because it was complemented what I did for my cooking, because I always wanted to do something to help people with their health, and it involved, what we eat, because we don't eat as well as we should in America. But unfortunately, we also found out that it was a lot of math classes for, nutrition. And I have math, basically they call it math dyslexia. I switch, there's a technical scientific name for it, but I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. But I switch the numbers. And every time I look at, advanced math, I can't remember the formulas. I could study and study and study and study. And I remember doing this in high school. My mother used to drill me. And I can't remember the formulas. So, that plan, anyways, it got ruined because of my health. And a couple years after this is when I ended up in the hospital with, it wasn't a stone, and the doctors still don't know what it was. All they tell me when they sent the material to be tested was I was growing plant matter inside my kidney. And they weren't sure what the hell was going on. Those in my 20s and 30s, I basically visited every hospital in my city. There was times where I had nurses who told me that, if you don't do what I tell you to do and sit down and stay in bed or stay in that chair, I'm going to give you enough drugs to keep you there. I had times when I was rolling around on the floor in the ER, and I had a nurse go, he can't be doing that. He needs to settle down. And when you're, in screaming agony, and they're waiting for, to give you something just to get the pain away, you're not going to go, well, I'm going to go sit in a chair or sit in a bed until you get around to giving me something to help me from the agony that I'm in. Luckily, I had a doctor who noticed, and he's like, we need to help this person because obviously there's something wrong with him. There was so much so much stuff that I dealt with in the hospital, just not even from my operations, between, doctors and nurses and all that fun stuff. So, finally in my 30s, or it was probably late 30s. Yeah, it had to be late 30s because I was finished my cooking degree, and I met that new doctor. They did that phosphate test and added all these citrus stuff to my diet. So I haven't had a kidney stone. God, it's probably 7 years now, but this doesn't mean that my health is any better than it was. I mean, there's times because of this scar that's here, I deal with, a constant ache that doesn't go away. It hasn't gone away for 20 years. If the weather gets really bad, I can feel it clenching or it'll tighten. This is why I also get, you might see me mention my massages every 3 weeks. This is another reason why I get massaged, because it helps enough that I can ignore the ache long enough to do whatever I need to do. Not much. I guess at this point that's about all I have to say. This will probably be this will be something that I'll deal with to another day that I finally leave this planet. I mean, I'll never have the health that, people who don't experience what I've been through have. I mean, they've cut my back, and unfortunately your back is the muscle that you use most. I mean, you use it when you're walking, you use it when you move your arms, you use it anytime you move, your back is involved somehow. So, I'm not as strong as most people, and, I tried to do, before I started my writing, I tried to do massage therapy, and I got through like a month of classes, and they're like, yeah, you're not going to be able to do this. You don't have the upper body strength to do this. So the only good thing to come out of this is when I've learned that we prevented these kidney stones. I took a month off about 5 years ago to take a road trip across the country, and I visited a bunch of friends that I've known online for years. And I went from New York to the West Coast, down to California, and across the middle of the country, ended up in like Tennessee, Colorado, that area. Visited a friend who at that time was living in Georgia, and then went back up the East Coast to New York, and I was gone for a month. It was awesome. I'd love to do it again, but I don't have a car to do that with right now. My 20-year-old Neon wouldn't make it now. It would. I'm sure I would get stuck somewhere. So, but maybe again someday. So this is getting kind of long. I'm gonna cut this off, but I just, I wanted to talk a little bit about my kidney disease, and maybe this, like I said, maybe somebody will find this someday and know there is somebody out there who had the strength to figure out what they wanted to do later in life. And, I'm not perfectly happy, but I'm better than I was 10 years ago or even 20 years ago. So things are going well. Okay, I guess I'm going to cut this off there. So this is it for now. I'll be back next Sunday, and I'll probably have, a less intense video. I'll be back to talking about my writing and what I'm doing for the rest of the month and into March already. Can you believe it? We'll be almost into March. Okay, see ya.